you were a fully armed U.S. Delta Force operator running into danger in the Iraqi desert. You're usually the stuff of other people's nightmares. But on that night in 2025, my team and I ran into something else, a dark purple rift. It didn't open fire. It just changed the laws of physics, and within seconds, my teammates were reduced to a pile of ash. I was lying face down in a dried riverbed, my tactical gloves soaked with cold sweat. My mouth tasted like rust. I couldn't tell if I'd bitten my tongue or if blood from my nose was running back down my throat. I'd already ripped off my night vision goggles. They'd exploded into a storm of static in front of my eyes, nearly burning out my retinas. My team leader, Marcus, the guy who'd been through Mogadishu, who'd gone in and out of urban combat in Fallujah 3 times without a scratch, was lying on his back to my left. His M4 carbine had landed 2 meters away, the handguard blown apart, the barrel bent at an impossible angle. His mouth hung open, his eyes rolled back so only the whites showed. Every capillary in his face had burst, turning it into something like a wax figure covered in a purple web. He was dead. I heard my own voice, and it didn't sound like me, more like a strangled whimper forced out of my throat. Then the rift stopped spinning. A thick, viscous current of air, reeking of ozone and rotting flesh, pressed down on my chest like an invisible hand. I couldn't breathe. Then it spoke, in Josh's voice. Josh, our point man. Josh, who'd been alive 5 minutes ago. The voice came from the pitch-black cave behind me, low and slow, every syllable scraping like fingernails across glass. Mitchell, you think you can hide? You open the door yourselves. I didn't turn around. I knew what I'd see if I did. But what broke me even more was the way every hair on my body stood on end at once, a prickling electric current crawling across my skin, as if my body recognized the truth before my mind could. Whatever was standing behind me, wearing my brother's voice, was not human. That's everything I experienced on October 17th, 2025, in that nameless valley. Even now, sitting in this windowless room, speaking into your recording equipment, my fingertips are still tingling. And to you, government spent an entire year trying to convince me it was just a case of collective combat stress. It wasn't until the documents leaked in 2026, until the closed-door hearings were uploaded online, that I realized it wasn't the first time. My name is Ben Carver, former U.S. Army 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, what you call Delta Master Sergeant. 14 years of service. I've been everywhere you've heard of, and plenty you haven't. Nothing I've said is exaggerated. I don't need to exaggerate. The truly terrifying things never need help. It started like any other mission. October 16th, 2025. Dusk. Western Iraq, Al-Anbar Province. A forward operating base codenamed Spider Nest. It was so small it didn't even exist on maps. Less than 20 kilometers from the Syrian border. Endless gravel desert stretched in every direction. When the wind picked up, the fine sand hit your face like needles. We were killing time in a makeshift gym tent. Josh, real name Joshua Rain, staff sergeant, was betting push-ups with Miguel using confiscated weight plates. Red, our weapons sergeant, sat on the ground polishing his MK-18 rifle for what had to be the 10th time. Brian was asleep in the corner, using his tactical pack as a pillow, a boonie hat covering his face. Captain Marcus wasn't there. He'd been called away 20 minutes earlier by an encrypted call from brigade. I had my feet up on a crate of 56 ammo, flipping through a paperback that was practically falling apart, not absorbing a single word. The air was thick with a mix of stale sweat, gun oil, and diesel fumes from the generator. It's hard to explain the feeling. It wasn't tension. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, a kind of boredom buried in your bones. Like the pressure drop before a storm, even when the sky is still clear. You don't consciously know something's wrong, but your body does. My adrenaline level was about the same as when I'm sitting on my couch back home drinking a beer. Then Marcus walked in. He pushed aside the nylon fly curtain, the evening light casting a long shadow behind him. His face didn't show much, but his eyes had changed. That's the difference between guys like us and regular soldiers. They look at rank, we look at eyes. The gray blue in Marcus's eyes had lost all trace of fatigue or ease, replaced by a sharp alertness I rarely saw. "Talk. 5 minutes," he said quietly. Everyone stopped what they were doing at the exact same moment. The Tactical Operations Center was a semi-underground bunker deep inside the base, built out of sandbags and corrugated steel. It was always freezing in there, the AC blasting like it was trying to turn us into popsicles. When we walked in, 2 men were already inside. One wore civilian khakis and a black polo, pale like he'd never seen sunlight, thin-framed glasses, a ruggedized tablet tucked under his arm. The other was the base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Hagen. He had a look on his face I only understood later. The kind of look you get when you know you're about to send your men into a minefield, but you can't tell them it's a minefield. The man in the polo set the tablet down and unlocked it with his fingerprint. The first image was a satellite photo, rough desert terrain, no clear landmarks, just a red circle marking a bend in a dry riverbed. Marcus leaned forward, hands on the table. "Listen up. This is a JSOC-directed emergency recovery mission. Codename, Shattered Mirror. 6 hours ago, one of our high-altitude, long-endurance reconnaissance platforms went silent in this area. It wasn't shot down. No mechanical failure. It transmitted its final telemetry and then went completely dark." He paused, scanning each of us. "Last telemetry shows it's still intact on the ground. Command is treating it as a soft landing." Josh let out a low whistle. "Intact on the ground. In our line of work, that's basically a gift from heaven. A high-altitude recon platform sitting there waiting to be recovered meant no firefights, no deep penetration ops. Just go in, grab the core components and data recorder, and go home." I should have felt relieved. I didn't, because Marcus wasn't finished. The bad news is he swiped the screen, bringing up the next image. This is where it landed. I looked at the coordinates, then at the map. The location was 90 kilometers from the nearest known road, deep inside a dead zone even Bedouins avoided. In our internal briefings, that area had a nickname, the Witch's Kitchen, not because of witches, but because there had never been any recorded firefights there. Yet 3 reconnaissance teams had disappeared without a trace. Every time, radio silence. Then a search team. Then 1 or 2 survivors found completely insane. The rest gone, like the desert swallowed them. I'd read those reports. Old cases. Official conclusions. Ambush, PTSD-induced narrative distortion. "How long do we have to prep?" I asked. Marcus looked at me. The man in the polo looked at me too. I couldn't quite read his expression, but there was nothing friendly in it. 1 hour, Marcus said. MH, 60 Blackhawk lifts at 2,100. 30 minutes for gear check. Then final intel update in the briefing room. Any questions? No one asked anything. We were professionals. Professionals don't hesitate in front of their commander. The next hour was always the quietest and the longest hour before any mission. I went back to my cot and laid out my gear across the canvas. MK-18 rifle, fitted with a suppressor and N/PQ, 15 infrared laser. PVS 31A night vision goggles. I spent a full 10 minutes checking the battery compartment and lenses, making sure there wasn't a single speck of dust. Ceramic plates in my vest. Spare mags. Fragmentation grenades. Flashbangs, smoke. 8 SIG Sauer M17 sidearm strapped to my thigh. And a custom hunting knife I never went anywhere without. Its blade coated in black titanium nitride. We don't pray, at least not before we step off. We check our gear, again and again, because at that stage, the only thing you can control is the steel and powder in your hands. I pulled on my uniform, mounted the NVG bracket clipped to my headset and mic. I smeared dark camo paint across my face and caught my reflection in the steel of my knife blade. I looked the same as before any mission, cold, steady, pupils slightly constricted. But I knew that set of coordinates was stuck in my head like a fishbone. Not because I was scared, but because of those 3 missing recon teams. I'd read the internal reports in detail. One of them mentioned the last survivor they found, a private first class named Kevin Jong. They found him curled up in a rock crevice, severely dehydrated, repeating a phrase in Arabic. He wasn't supposed to know Arabic. He kept saying, asterisk alil al aswad ally, asterisk the living black shadow. At the time, I wrote it off as battlefield hysteria. 2,100 hours. The sky over Al Anbar was completely black, no moon. Desert darkness isn't like city darkness. This was absolute crushing black, like someone had dropped a giant iron pot over the earth. 2 MH, 60 Blackhawks tore through the night. We hunched low and ran in a line through the swirling sand toward the open side doors. Inside, the only light was a dim red glow, painting everyone's faces the color of dried blood, like a cabin full of the dead. Marcus sat across from me, Josh and Miguel beside him. Red was diagonal from us, cradling his suppressed MK-18 like always. Brian, our comms guy, sat closest to the cockpit, headset on, tapping away at a rugged laptop, running final checks on comms and the tactical data link. Our medic, Wilkes, sat near the door, first time running a ghost op with us. He kept rubbing the strap of his med pack with his thumb over and over. I clipped in my harness, braced the stock of my rifle in my shoulder, barreled down toward the floor. The helicopter surged upward. Everyone's stomach dropped, then banked hard, pushing low and fast toward the northwest. I turned my head and looked out through the open door. To the naked eye, the ground was pure black. But through nods, the desert became a glowing green ocean. Flat sand, low ridges, dry riverbeds, all rendered in that eerie green clarity. Our shadows raced across the ground below like a flock of silent crows. The radio channel was dead, except for breathing and rotor noise. We were used to that silence before contact. In that moment, the world is simple, coordinates, objective, rules of engagement, extraction plan. When everything becomes simple, you feel safe. But that's also when your mind starts drifting in directions it shouldn't. There's something hypnotic about rotor noise. Staring down into that endless dark, I suddenly remembered summer nights back in Tennessee, lying in the grass and staring at the Milky Way. Back then, I thought the sky was my friend, that the universe was just a vast black curtain filled with curiosity and wonder. Later, Afghanistan caves, Iraqi ruins, I realized something else. The night sky isn't a curtain, it's a door. And the only reason we think it's beautiful is because we're standing far enough away not to see what's hiding behind it. Fog of war. We use that phrase all the time. Soldiers never fully understand the battlefield. It's like trying to see the enemy through thick fog. That fog is made of delayed intel, broken comms, adrenaline, fear. But after enough near-death moments, I started to wonder if that fog wasn't something we created. Maybe it's always been there, older than us, older than war itself. Maybe the whole point of civilization is to let us hide inside little bubbles of light we've built, pretending the fog doesn't exist. And once you step outside that bubble, far enough, deep enough, your camo, your rifle, your rule book, they all tear apart like paper. Out there, reality itself is soft, semi-transparent, like concrete that never fully set. And there are things living in that fog, things that have always been there, perfectly used to us not seeing them. At the time, I didn't know our Black Hawk was flying straight into the deepest part of that fog at 240 kilometers an hour. Around 22:30, Brian's voice finally broke 2 hours of silence over the comms. Shepard 6-2, TOC just pushed an update. Last electromagnetic pulse from the target beacon was picked up 3 hours ago. Analysis says the locator's still active. You'll have a low-power RF signal guiding you to the exact position once you're on the ground. Target may be larger than expected. He paused. TOC also says watch for any unusual radio phenomena en route. Unusual radio phenomena? Josh cut in. What the hell does that mean? It means they don't know either. Marcus said, taking control of the channel. Check ammo. Chamber around. Safety's on semi. We're not in hostile territory, but ROE stays the same. No firing unless hostile intent is confirmed. I don't want anyone dumping mags into some damn drone wreck. I flipped off the safety, racked the charging handle, felt the solid resistance as a 5. 56 round seeded into the chamber. Then I released the bolt, and set the selector back to semi. The aircraft started descending, weaving through terrain. The pilot was flying low, masking radar behind the land. That hollow drop hit my stomach again. Then the bird banked sharply, and ahead of us, a massive black gash opened in the earth. An ancient dry riverbed, over 300 meters across. Its banks were jagged shale, carved by wind, reflecting a dull gray in the faint light. The riverbed itself was packed with sand and stones, scattered with dead tree trunks twisted into shapes like blackened bones. The helicopter didn't land. It hovered about 5 meters above the ground. Fast rope insertion, no LZ, minimize ambush risk. Go, go, go. The rope dropped. I grabbed it first, gloves screaming against the nylon as I slid down, hitting the ground in 3 seconds flat. Boots slammed into gravel. I moved left immediately, dropped to one knee, rifle up, establishing a sector. Behind me, Josh, Miguel, Red, Brian, Wilkes came down one after another. Marcus was last. By the time he hit the ground, the Black Hawk was already spooling up. The rope snapped back up, rotor wash kicking up a violent sandstorm that rattled against our goggles. In less than 30 seconds, the helicopter pitched up, banked, and disappeared back into the darkness. The rotor noise faded, swallowed by wind and sand, until all that was left was the faint hiss of static in my headset and my own heartbeat. We were alone in the dead silence of that riverbed. Shepard 6-2, move into search formation. Marcus's voice came low over the comms. Josh, you and Miguel, take point 50 meters out. Red, fire support. Watch the high ground along both banks. Brian, monitor the radio spectrum. Report any off-frequency signals immediately. Wilkes, your center. Mitchell, you've got rear security. Rear security meant I'd be moving backward, keeping my eyes on the team's blind spot at all times. Standard procedure in open terrain. I tightened the stock into my shoulder and began stepping back. Through my goggles, my teammates looked like green ghosts, silently collapsing from a loose skirmish line into a diamond formation, advancing along the uneven riverbed. For the first 15 minutes, everything was normal. The ground was flat, fine sand and smooth stones worn down by centuries of floods. Boots crunched softly. My own breathing echoed inside my helmet, steady and rhythmic. Through NVGs, every man was a green silhouette, their IR lasers drawing invisible lines through the dark. Then Josh broke the silence. Lead, front, about 150 out. That's something unusual. His voice was calm, but there was a tightness I hadn't heard before. Not wreckage, no metal reflection, no debris field. Looks like a clean pit. A clean pit. The phrase sent a chill up the back of my neck. Something falling from tens of thousands of feet or landing by unknown means. And not a single fragment scattered. Marcus caught it too. All elements halt. Establish security. Josh, give me detail. A faint crackle. Then Josh again. Perfect circle. Estimate 20 to 25 meters across. Edges are smooth, like it was burned in. Shallow, less than a meter deep. Center. He paused, adjusting his nods. There's an object, about 3 meters tall, maybe 2 wide. Shape's irregular. Doesn't look metallic. More like stone. Stone. Marcus pressed. Any markings? Antennas? Hardpoints? Negative. Nothing. And lead. It doesn't reflect. In nods, it's just black, like it's absorbing everything. Bare Eye picks up a faint outline. Purple, maybe. I can't tell. I was kneeling at the rear, back to them, but I could hear the shift in everyone's breathing. Professionals don't show tension in volume. They show it in rhythm. Josh's breathing had broken its cadence. Miguel shifted half a step without thinking, the crunch of gravel too loud in the silence. Advance. Slow, Marcus ordered. No hesitation in his voice, but I knew he caught that detail too. Absolute black. The PVS 31A could amplify starlight enough to make plants photosynthesize. Nothing in nature registers as total absorption, not even a cave mouth. There's always some scatter, some return. We moved like deer edging toward a cliff. Formation tightened. Spacing dropped from 50 meters to 20. Weapons stayed low, fingers poised just outside the trigger guards. At 50 meters, I turned and looked. The moment it entered my field of view, my body reacted before my mind did. My stomach clenched. A dull ache hit low in my gut, that primal reflex triggered by extreme fear. Only then did my eyes catch up. It was a perfect circle. Not approximate, perfect. Like it had been drawn into the desert with a compass the size of God. The walls showed no sign of excavation. No displaced sand. No debris. The material itself had changed, restructured at a molecular level. The inner surface was coated in a black, glassy substance, smooth enough to reflect like a mirror. And the object, I couldn't call it craft. There were no rivets, no seams, no exhaust ports, no antenna arrays. It was made of dozens of irregular geometric planes, like shattered black glass fused back together, but at angles that made no sense in real space. Some surfaces looked concave until you shifted your gaze and they became convex. It hurt to look at. My brain resisted processing it. That's when the low-frequency hum began. At first I thought it was the Black Hawk echoing back from the distance. But no, this was deeper, below the threshold of clear hearing. It wasn't a sound so much as a weight. My armor plates vibrated faintly. My dental fillings sent sharp pulses of pain. Even the fluid behind my eyes felt like it was resonating. You guys hear that? Brian stopped, one hand pressed to his headset. His voice carried restrained unease. Not external, it's in my comms, but it's not a signal. This is physical vibration coming through the hardware. Stay focused. Marcus snapped. Maintain distance. Arc formation, overlapping cover. Mitchell, move to 3 o'clock, get a lateral angle. Watch the edge stability. I moved. Inhale, exhale, step by step, peeling off to the right. The air had changed. A new smell crept in. Not sulfur, not gunpowder, not decay. It was like ozone after a lightning strike, but mixed with a sharp metallic sweetness, like sucking on an old copper key. I reached position, raised my rifle. My aim point couldn't lock. Red dot drifting across the surface like it was coated in oil. I shut it off and switched to irons, aligning front sight and rear aperture. And that's when I saw the crack. A vertical slit ran down the front of the object from top to bottom. At first I thought it was structural damage, something we could use to identify it. But as I shifted my angle, what lay inside froze me in place. It wasn't internal structure, no whiting, no misgenity. Inside that slit was a slow, rotating mass of dark purple light, like a dense liquid turning in place. And deep within it, barely visible, was a shifting geometric pattern, more complex than any kaleidoscope by orders of magnitude. I glanced at it for less than a second. Pain detonated behind my temples, like an ice pick driven straight through my skull into my frontal lobe. I snapped my gaze away. Something warm ran down past my lip. I wiped it with my glove, black-red blood smeared across the back of my hand, ink dark in the green glow of night vision. Mitchell, you're bleeding? Marcus's silhouette moved closer. He didn't touch me, just angled his head, taking a look. I'm fine, I said. My voice came out far hoarser than I expected. Captain, that thing isn't a vehicle. No propulsion system, no man-made structure. There's something moving inside it. What did you see? I don't know. I answered honestly. My brain is telling me it's alive. But I didn't see any organic tissue, just light and some kind of depth I can't describe. The moment I said that, Josh broke. It started with a grunt. Then his knees buckled and he dropped into the sand. His rifle fell in front of him as he clutched his helmet with both hands, like he was trying to force something out of his skull. A sound came out of his throat, half growl, half sob, and then over the open channel, his scream nearly tore my eardrums apart. It's screaming. Can't you hear it? It's screaming. We couldn't hear anything like that. All we heard was Josh. Then Miguel and Red both stepped back at the same time. Red's MK, 18, snapped upward. I saw his lips moving, but whatever he was saying got swallowed by a surge of electromagnetic noise blasting through my headset. It wasn't random static. It had rhythm, like a massive heartbeat translated into radio frequency. Then Josh opened fire. Not controlled shots, not bursts. Full auto. Muzzle flash strobed white through the NVGs, tracer rounds carving warped lines through the dark straight into the object. We all hit the ground or scrambled for cover. Some rounds sparked off rocks, but most of them passed straight through that purple evening. No impact, no deflection. Just gone, swallowed into something silent and bottomless. Cease fire. Cease fire. Marcus shouted over comms, but Josh couldn't hear him. He stayed on the trigger until the mag ran dry, bolt locking back. Then he collapsed forward like a puppet with its strings cut, face first into the sand. Then the thing reacted. No explosión, no beam. Nothing we'd ever been trained to expect. It just pulsed. The Leofung widened suddenly, like a pupil snapping open in the dark. A spherical force surged outward from the object. I could see it, air itself turning into a translucent wall, carrying sand and gravel at impossible speed. It hit us. I was thrown backward, lifted off my feet, and slammed into a rock 3 meters behind me. My ceramic plate took part of the impact, but it still felt like my lungs were going to rupture. My vision exploded into sparks. For a few seconds, I blacked out. When I came to, my ears were ringing, high-pitched, like 1,000 cicadas screaming inside my skull. My mouth was full of blood and grit. My NVGs hung crooked. I tore them off and forced myself up. The scene around me slowly pushed through the noise. Miguel lay 5 meters to my left, tried to prop himself up on one elbow, blood leaking from his eyes and nose. Red sat frozen, rifle across his knees, eyes unfocused, lips moving silently, praying, maybe. Brian was on his knees, hammering at his laptop, the screen nothing but corrupted garbage. Wilkes lay curled on his side, clutching his abdomen, breathing shallow and fast. Marcus was already on his feet. He staggered over to Josh and rolled him onto his back. Josh was alive, but his eyes wide, impossibly wide. Pupils blown, so large there was almost no iris left. His lips had turned blue, and from deep in his throat came a string of broken syllables. Not a door, not, it's alive, it saw me, it's inside me, it's not a ship, it's a place, it's a living place, it's remaking me. His voice was flat, monotone, like a damaged tape recorder looping worn-out audio. I started to move toward him, but Marcus raised a fist. Tactical signal, freeze. The hum stopped. All sound snapped back into clarity, breathing wind, heartbeat. The sky looked normal again. The temperature rose. The Leofung shrank back into a thin line. The object sat there, silent, inert, like the eye of a storm. We made a fatal mistake. We thought it was a defensive response, some kind of temporary discharge. We thought we had time. Move the wounded back to that slope. Set up a casualty collection point. Marcus said, forcing control back into his voice. Brian, can you reach TOC? No, Brian was shaking. Full spectrum interference. Not a jammer. The entire EM spectrum is compressed. My instruments show a standing wave in the air, low frequency, around 19 hertz. That's close to the resonance frequency of a human eyeball. It can induce visual hallucinations. I'm not hallucinating, Miguel rasped, pointing at the blood on his face. Hallucinations don't make you bleed. Enough. Marcus cut in. Whatever this is, staying here gets US nowhere. Fall back to the LZ. Wait for daylight. Wait for reinforcements. That's an order. We loaded Josh onto a stretcher. Wilkes injected him with a sedative, but his eyes stayed open, pupils expanding and contracting in a rhythm none of us could see. Miguel and Red took the flanks. Brian and I covered the rear. We pulled back slowly from the pit, heading toward a raised gravel embankment along the riverbank. Natural cover, defensible, visible from the air. As we withdrew, I glanced back one last time. The object hadn't moved, but something had changed. The pit had grown, maybe 2 meters wider than before, and along its edges, that black glassy material had developed fine, branching patterns, like veins or roots. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they were spreading deeper into the sand. It wasn't dormant, it was growing. We set up a perimeter behind the embankment. Marcus ordered staggered rest cycles, but no one slept. Josh was placed at the center. His body started showing symptoms none of us understood. His temperature fluctuated wildly, burning hot one moment, cold the next. Under his skin, subtle ripples moved, like something shifting beneath the surface. Wilkes checked his temp 3 times. Each reading contradicted the last. Ear, 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Armpit, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't something I can treat, Wilkes whispered beside me. This isn't even a disease. His body is undergoing some kind of, I can't explain it, cellular restructuring. Don't say that, I replied, but it sounded hollow even to me. A sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds, washing the desert in pale silver. For about 15 minutes, the world felt unnaturally still. No wind, no distant howls. Marcus sat on a rock, absent-mindedly carving into a scrap of wood. Miguel clutched his rifle, staring at the pit. Red murmured something under his breath. I recognized the rhythm of Psalm 23, even if I couldn't make out the words. Brian kept trying to restore comms, fingers flying uselessly over the keys. For a moment, I had this strange illusion, like I was back in some quiet summer night from childhood. Safe, calm, nothing wrong. Then Miguel's red dot sight flickered and died. Not fading, not draining, just off, like someone flipped a switch. Then mine, then everyone's. Battery indicators on our NVGs started jumping, full to empty, back and forth. The tubes emitted a sharp whine as the image warped violently. The green world twisted, stretched, compressed, reshaped into impossible forms by some invisible force. I ripped the goggles off. My naked eyes adjusted, and what I saw was clearer than any device could ever show. The object was no longer in the pit. It was hovering above us, less than 20 meters overhead. Silent, watching. It had grown at least twice its original size. No longer a fractured geometric mass, but something semi-translucent, expanding and contracting like a deep-sea jellyfish. At its core, the Leifung was fully open. The dark purple light inside had become something else entirely, something that didn't exist in any spectrum I knew. It wasn't red, not blue, not violet, not black. It was the absence of color, like the universe had forgotten to fill that space with light. Then the cold hit, not desert night cold, something deeper, like liquid nitrogen seeping into bone marrow. Every breath crystallized into thick white vapor. Frost formed along my eyebrows and lashes. Ice crept across my gloves, freezing the grip of my rifle solid. It was impossible. Everything I knew about physics was screaming that it was impossible. But the worst part wasn't the cold. It was the fear. I've been in close quarters firefights, pinned in kill zones, laying down suppressive fire with a machine gun. I've held a buddy's intestines in the dark, trying to shove them back into his body. I felt every kind of terror a human being can feel. But that time, that fear didn't come from my brain. It wasn't adrenaline. It was injected from the outside, like an invisible ice-cold hand slipping through the gaps between every molecule in my body and grabbing hold of the thing we call self-awareness. My sanity started to dissolve. I heard Miguel crying. Full collapse, a grown man sobbing like a child. Red dropped his MK-18, curled into himself, smashing his head against the ground. Brian started laughing, hysterical, uncontrollable, his fingers still hammering at a dead keyboard like it was the last ritual tying him to reality. Marcus was the only one still functioning. His face was drained of color under the moonlight, jaw clenched tight. He pulled out the M320 grenade launcher, loaded a high explosive round, dropped to one knee, aimed, fired. The whole sequence took less than 3 seconds. Perfect execution. The 40mm round arced cleanly toward the entity. I watched it travel. Then about 5 meters out, it slowed. It didn't detonate. It decelerated impossibly, like it had entered a dense, invisible gel. It warped, stretched, and then vanished. No explosion, no fragments, nothing. Like a pebble dropped into something deeper than the ocean. Then the entity attacked. From the Leifung at its core, 2 hair-thin black tendrils extended. They moved slowly, like sea anemones drifting in water, but Miguel and Red couldn't dodge. Something held them in place. Arms spread, heads forced back like they were being executed by an invisible force. The tendrils touched their chests. They passed through body armor, through ceramic plates, straight into their bodies. No blood, no wound, but their bodies began to change. Not burned, not torn, warped, like someone wrinkling fabric, the fabric of reality itself. Miguel's right arm twisted 3 full rotations. No bone snapped, just reshaped like rubber being wrung out. Red's torso collapsed inward, ribs losing all structural meaning, his chest folding like a crushed cardboard box. Their eyes still moved, their mouths still open, but no sound came out. Then they lifted off the ground. They hung there, 3 seconds of silent horror. Then they dropped, like sacks of wet sand, spreading on impact in ways no human body should. They were my brothers. Menide fuit beside. And now, they didn't even have a shape you could call human. My brain blanked the image out, reduced it to static. I felt part of myself break right there. No. Wilkes screamed and tried to run toward them, but Marcus yanked him down hard by his pack. Fall back. Everybody fall the hell back. Drop all extra weight. Move to the bank. My body obeyed before my mind did. I grabbed one end of Josh's stretcher. Brian grabbed the other. We ran, dragging him across sand and gravel, his body still twitching under the surface. Wilkes stumbled behind us. Marcus covered the rear, but the terrain changed. We'd come from downstream. I knew that. Running back should have been a straight shot, 500 meters to the bank. But the riverbed kept splitting ahead of us in ways it hadn't before. We passed a cracked boulder I knew we'd already passed. 3 minutes later, we passed it again. Like space itself had been twisted into a Mobius strip. We were looping. The terrain shifting, Brian panted. His laughter was gone, replaced by something cold and precise. Mitchell, we're not moving in a straight line. Look at my shadow. I glanced down. Moonlight cast our shadows forward, meaning we were heading north, the right direction. But the edges of the shadows were trembling, slowly drifting sideways against the laws of physics. Like the angle of the moon itself was changing. That thing was manipulating the coordinate system of the entire area. Marcus caught up with us. His breathing was ragged, uneven. Blood seeped under his armor. Probably broken ribs from the blast. It's about to surge again. I can feel it. Listen, he grabbed my shoulder hard enough to grind bone. You take Josh and Wilkes that way. See that rock fissure? There's a shallow cave. Get inside. Do not come out, no matter what you hear. Brian and I will draw it off. Marcus, that's an order. I'm ordering you to live. Move. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. He wasn't just a commander anymore. He was a man who'd made his choice and accepted it. He stepped back, pulled Brian with him. They raised their rifles and opened fire toward the glowing mass behind us. Gunfire echoed through the riverbed, desperate, fragile. Wilkes and I half-carried, half-dragged Josh toward the fissure. I looked back once. The entity stopped moving. Its surface split into countless tiny Liafeng, all glowing with that same purple light. Then erupted. Black light. I know that sounds impossible. There aren't words for it. A wave of darkness that burned brighter than light surged outward. It hit Marcus. For a fraction of a second, his outline became perfectly defined. Then everything inside that outline vanished. Color, texture, substance gone. His body turned into a gray-white ash, holding shape for less than a heartbeat before collapsing, like a sand sculpture in the wind. Brian's scream cut off at the same instant. I saw him lifted into the air by an invisible force, twisting like water down a drain, pulled into the Liafeng. His final cry compressed into something beyond human hearing. Then silence. I dragged Josh into the cave. It wasn't deep, maybe 7 or 8 meters, but there was a recessed pocket inside. I laid him down there. Wilkes collapsed, eyes hollow, body shaking uncontrollably. Outside, nothing. No footsteps, no wind, no gunfire. The thing didn't follow us in. It just hovered outside the entrance. Through a narrow 2-meter gap, I could see the faint glow along its edge. I slumped against the rock wall. My weapon was still in my hands, but I knew it was useless. A stick would have done just as much. Josh lay at my feet. His breathing had slowed, steady but wrong. The movement under his skin had stopped. Wilkes shut his eyes, whispering, not prayers. Procedures, field medicine protocols, airway, maintain temperature, establish for, over and over, without doing anything. In that silence, time became solid. Then Josh sat up. No transition, no groan, no muscle tension. He just rose, like a puppet pulled upright. His eyes opened, solid black, no whites, no eddies, a darkness deeper than the cave itself. He turned toward me. It was still his face, but the movements were off. Like something wearing a human expression it didn't fully understand. Then he spoke, his voice but wrong, each word spaced unnaturally, like something ancient was forcing human vocal cords to approximate language. You should not have come here. This is not your domain. You open something that does not belong to you, and you do not even know where you stand. I raised my pistol. The SIG M17's sights lined up on his forehead. My hand shook, not from fear, but because every instinct in my body resisted what my mind was telling me. He was Josh. We trained together, fought together. A month ago, he showed me a video of his daughter learning to walk. You're not Josh, I heard myself say, the head tilted, far beyond what a human neck should allow. Then it smiled, not with the mouth, but like something beneath the skin pushed upward into the shape of a smile. Josh is gone. This vessel was emptied the moment it touched me. I am only using it to tell you this. You have touched the boundary of dimensions. Your civilization has not evolved the organs required to process this knowledge. Leave now, or remain here. The choice is yours, but your time is short. Wilkes suddenly stood up. He screamed at it, voice breaking. What are you? What the hell are you? The body turned toward him. Those black eyes didn't blink. It didn't answer, but the world outside the cave began to convulse. Not an earthquake, something worse. Space itself was twitching. Through the narrow gap, I saw every grain of sand in the riverbed lift into the air, suspended. Gravity twisted. The ground felt like a wall, the wall like the sky. Wilkes slammed into the rock. I gripped the stretcher straps, so hard my joints cracked. Through Josh's throat, it spoke one final sentence. The door has marked you. Then the body collapsed. The black in his eyes vanished, returning to normal human color. But the pupils stayed blown wide, fixed, unresponsive. He was dead. No wounds. No straged. Whatever made him gone. Wilkes rushed to check his pulse, started CPR. I pulled it back. It was pointless. Josh had been gone long before that. Back at the pit, the moment he pulled the trigger. Then everything stopped. The purple glow outside vanished instantly. The floating stones dropped all at once, like some grotesque rain scattering across the sand. Gravity snapped back into place. Space felt solid again. The low-frequency vibration disappeared, replaced by a hollow, piercing silence. I stayed at the cave entrance. I don't know how long, my M17 train on the outside. Wilkes curled up behind me, silent. Later, he told me he had no memory of that time at all. Just a blank void, like his mind refused to record anything. The first light of dawn was gray. No dramatic sunrise, just a dull, lead-colored haze bleeding over the horizon, revealing a riverbed that had been completely altered. I stepped out. The pit was still there, but the object was gone. At the center was a deep black scorch mark. Around it lay a layer of fine, ash-like powder, so light the slightest breeze lifted it to knee height. When it touched my boots, it had no heat, no smell, just a strange static sensation. I found what was left of Marcus, or what he had become, a small pile of pale gray dust. His ceramic armor plates were still there, but shattered into faint pink crystalline fragments. Nearby lay his dog tags, partially melted by something that wasn't fire. The chain and metal had fused into a warped silver mass, like a tear of molten wax. I picked it up. It was still warm, but not from heat. It felt more like a residual pulse of energy. Brian, Miguel, Red. They were never found. Not just their bodies, any trace of them. No blood, no fibers, No evidence they had ever existed at that location. Like the universe corrected an error and erased them from the record. I stood there for a long time in that unnatural silence. It wasn't until I heard the distant rotors of a black hawk that I realized I was still alive. I looked up as it descended. The crew stared at us, 2 living men, 1 intact body, and 4 who would never come back from the fog. The next 72 hours were interrogation, medical exams, more interrogation. They kept me alone in a windowless room. 1 fluorescent light overhead. Gray soundproof walls. Men in uniforms and men in suits came in shifts, asking the same questions, making me repeat every detail. And every time I described the spatial distortion, the black tendrils, Josh speaking, they stopped me, told me it was a stress-induced hallucination. They gave me a cleaner version. We had been hit by advanced electronic warfare from an unknown force. Collective hallucination. Friendly fire in the confusion. They showed me a report, signed by agencies I didn't recognize. It even included a psychological analysis, claiming I couldn't cope with the possibility that I'd kill my teammates. So my mind constructed an incomprehensible external entity as a defense mechanism. Fog of war, Sergeant Major, the bald man in the suit said, hands folded, looking at me like a patient. You experienced extreme combat stress. This isn't your fault. I didn't say anything, because in my pocket, I had Marcus's dog tags. Every 6 hours, almost to the minute, they emitted a faint blue-violet glow for 10 to 15 seconds. No radiation, no chemical coating, just something left behind. Something not from here. I told them. They took the tags, analyzed them, came back with phosphorescence. Phosphorescence doesn't behave like that. It doesn't pulse on a perfect interval. It doesn't, when I close my fist around it, make my bones see that color inside the leafon. I knew they were lying. They knew I knew. But we both understood some things can't be acknowledged. Because acknowledging it means admitting our physics is incomplete. That beyond the space we explore and beneath the sand we walk on, there are things older, colder, and far less comprehensible than aliens. So I signed the NDA, retired, went back to rural Kentucky, bought a cabin, tried to bury it all under fishing, chopping wood, and 14 years of train suppression. It worked, most of the time. Then the 2026 leaks happened. An anonymous source, something called the UAP Transparency Project, dumped files onto encrypted networks. Satellite images, thermal captures, heavily redacted after-action reports. One of them, codenamed Asterisk Shattered Mirror. Asterisk 80% blacked out. But what remained was enough to make my hands shake. 8-man recovery team encountered non-conventional entity. Anomalous physics survivor describes target as interdimensional intrusion. Post-incident interviews align with high-dimensional organism traits. Recommend threat level escalation to Omega. 17 similar unresolved cases since the Cold War. I sat in my cabin, screen light cold on my face, and read it 4 times. Then I picked up the dog tags. A year later, they still glowed. Last night, I left them on my nightstand. At 3:12 a.m., they lit up. I checked my watch. The second hand moved normally, but inside that glow, it seemed slower. Or maybe time itself was moving differently around it. I didn't go to Washington for the hearing, but I got the audio. A retired Navy intelligence officer sat before a panel and calmly described something almost identical to what we saw. He used the term interdimensional organism. The room erupted. A senator demanded to know if he was implying demons. He didn't deny it. I turned off the recording, sat in the dark all night. Now I'm sitting here, speaking into this recorder, telling everything exactly as it happened. Not for revenge, not for money, not to prove anything, because I finally understand something. We always think we're staring into the abyss, that we're the observers, and the abyss is what's being observed. But in that riverbed, when that leafon opened and something looked back, I realized something else. We're the abyss. Our reality, our physics, our dimension is just a thin sheet of ice. On top of it, we've built civilization, war, nations. Underneath is an ocean. Flushed, dark, bottomless, and something is moving down there. It may not hate us, Hate requires equality. To it, we might be nothing more than air bubbles frozen in ice. It might not even notice us, except in those rare moments when its slow movements crush us by accident, until one day, we drill the wrong hole through the ice. We send planes, satellites, recon teams. We think we're searching for spacecraft, for conventional unknown threats. But some doors were never meant to be knocked on. Whatever I saw, interdimensional predator, higher dimensional life form, or something older that ancient cultures try to call demons, when it spoke through Josh, it used a plural. Asterisk we. Asterisk and the reports like Shattered Mirror, the ones that leaked, that's just the tip of it. So here's my question for anyone hearing this, whether you believe it or not. If our reality is just a fragile membrane among countless dimensions, if those things have always been out there, moving through the deepest layer of the fog of war, how much restraint will it take for us to stop knocking on doors? And you, in the middle of some sleepless night, have you ever heard a sound so low it barely exists? Felt a sudden drop in temperature in one corner of your room? That prickling on your skin, and told yourself it was just the house settling, or the wind outside? If I were you, I'd take a very careful look at where that sound is coming from, because the moment you figure it out, it might be figuring you out too.